She walks into the room not with noise, not with ceremony, but with something colder, heavier, silence. You'd think she's fragile, right? Alone, no ring, no footsteps following her home, no name stitched beside hers, and yet there's something in her eyes that makes you look twice. Like maybe, just maybe, she's not waiting for anyone. Maybe she's the one who left. Maybe she's the storm they couldn't survive. People see a woman living alone and they whisper, "How sad." But oh, if they only knew what it takes to sit in a room full of shadows and still sleep with the light off. She doesn't live alone. She rules alone. People hear that and twitch like it's a glitch in the system. As if a woman seated in silence without a witness must somehow be lonely or lost. But no. This isn't loneliness, darling. This is reign. This is what happens when the crown doesn't need applause to shine. You see, when a man lives alone, they call it peace, they call it focus, they call it power. When a woman does it, then it must mean something went wrong. A tragedy, a heartbreak, a collapse. But perhaps it's none of those things. Perhaps it's strategy. Perhaps it's evolution. Perhaps she got tired of asking for space and simply took it. She rules not with a scepter, but with stillness. She commands not with noise, but with energy. Every room she's not in becomes more curious about her absence. Every word she doesn't say speaks louder than a scream. And every soul that once demanded her attention is now whispering into silence, wondering where they went wrong. Oh, how delightful. Because see, ruling doesn't always require a throne. Sometimes it's a mattress on the floor with candles burning. Sometimes it's unpaid bills in a neat stack and coffee that's too strong. Sometimes it's laughing at your own jokes because no one else gets them. Sometimes it's dancing to music only she can hear in a room only she has access to. The most dangerous kind of queen? One who no longer needs validation. There's power in being alone. Not lonely, alone. There's a difference, and most people are too distracted to tell. She's not waiting for a man to return. She's not hoping for a call. She's not posting cryptic messages and hoping someone notices. She noticed herself. And now the world has to live with that. You see, when she was surrounded by noise, by voices, by suggestions and criticism and unsolicited advice, she smiled and nodded and absorbed it all like a sponge. She tried to be soft, she tried to be polite, but inside, a storm. And when the storm finally couldn't be contained anymore, she walked out. She didn't slam the door. She didn't announce her exit. She vanished. Like a ghost who realized she was haunting her own story. And now, in her solitude, she isn't lost. She is finally... She wakes up when she wants, eats what she likes, spends her nights creating, imagining, healing. The world thinks she's sleeping, but no. She's designing, she's training, she's sharpening. And when she walks into the world again, they won't recognize her, because this version of her doesn't flinch when ignored, doesn't shrink when challenged. This version, she laughs at the drama, she sips her tea while empires fall. She says less and sees everything. You ever seen someone become so calm it's unsettling? That's her now. She walks into chaos and the chaos adjusts to her. Because she's no longer trying to fit in, she's making everything fit around her. Friends fell off, lovers got confused, family asked what's wrong, but nothing's wrong. It's just that she's not them anymore. She's not begging to be chosen. She's not negotiating her worth. She's not handing over her crown in exchange for crumbs. She's holding it tightly now, not out of fear, but because it's hers. They underestimated her because she smiled too much, because she said sorry too often, because she stayed quiet to keep the peace. But now her silence is a warning, not a weakness. Her smile, that's strategy. And her peace, well, that's her most violent weapon. Because you can't manipulate someone who doesn't need you. You can't guilt trip someone who has burned their own bridges and learned to swim. And you certainly can't control someone who's learned how to rule herself. That's the twist no one saw coming. She doesn't live alone. She reigns in territory too wild for the weak, too sacred for the fake, too powerful for the small-minded. She doesn't answer calls not aligned with her purpose. She doesn't open doors for energy she had to heal from. She doesn't entertain the clowns who once made her doubt her magic, because she's not in the business of babysitting egos anymore. She's building an empire, one silent, strategic, unstoppable moment at a time. They think she's weak because she forgave, because she kept coming back, because she gave chances and explanations and more time than they deserved. But see, that's where the joke lands, isn't it? They don't get that forgiveness is a weapon, not a white flag, not surrender. No. It's what you give when you're done playing checkers and you've started playing chess. When you see every move 10 steps ahead and you still smile and say, oh, but it's not okay. Not really. It's just easier to say that than to waste breath on broken clocks and blind mice. She forgave people who were preying on her downfall, not praying for her. No, they were preying on her, feeding off her softness, her compassion, her habit of looking for the light in people who live in the dark. She kept offering hands to people who only wanted to drag her down, and she called it love. She called it loyalty, until she stopped calling it anything at all, until the silence hit harder than any goodbye ever could. Because that's the real punchline. When she goes quiet, that's when it's already over. You just haven't realized you've been cut off yet. And still, she forgives. Not for them, not to make them feel better or to tie things up in a nice little bow. No, she forgives because she refuses to let their poison take root. She refuses to let bitterness rot her from the inside. They wanted her to become like them, hard, hollow, hateful. But instead, she stayed human. That's her rebellion. That's her crime. That's her victory. While they keep playing the same tired games, she walks away with her soul. And people confuse revenge with justice. But she's smarter than that. Revenge requires effort, planning, energy, and honestly, they're not worth the calories. Forgiveness, though, that's a burn, a cold, cutting kind of power, because it says, I could destroy you, but I won't, because you're not on my level. It's dismissive, it's surgical, it's lethal in its silence, and it leaves them spinning, trying to figure out why their chaos no longer works on her. She learned that the most dangerous kind of woman is the one who no longer seeks closure. She doesn't need answers. She doesn't need confessions. She doesn't need you to understand what you did wrong. Because she already understood everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every time she was gaslit and guilt-tripped and twisted up in knots. And still, she stayed soft. Still, she loved. Still she hoped, and that's what makes her terrifying. They mistook her kindness for ignorance, but she knew. Oh, she always knew. She just gave them the space to change, gave them the rope, hoping they'd climb. But instead, they choked. And now they get to live in the ruins they built, wondering why she's no longer offering blueprints to rebuild. Wondering why her name doesn't come up in their messages anymore. Why her energy feels like an empty room they can't re-enter. She walks past her old ghosts like they're furniture. Familiar but useless. Decor that no longer fits the new design. And oh, she's redesigning everything now. From her habits to her environment, from her circle to her soul. It's a purge, a rebirth. And the ashes of her past? Well, she dances in them. Barefoot, smiling, unbothered. Because that's what happens when you stop trying to fix people who enjoy being broken. Forgiveness isn't soft, it's surgical. It's what you give when you want to heal faster than they expected, when you want to remove the infection before it spreads, when you choose your peace over your pride. And she's chosen, all right? She's chosen herself. That's why she's glowing different. That's why her presence now feels like a locked vault instead of an open door. Because once she forgives you, you don't get the same version of her again. You get the lesson. They thought they won because she didn't scream, because she didn't make a scene, because she walked away quietly. But you don't hear the bullet that ends the game either. You just feel the impact. And now that she's done explaining herself, done overthinking, done overgiving, she's become the thing they fear the most. A woman with nothing to lose and everything to rebuild. A woman who can look you dead in the eye and smile, not because she forgot, but because she finally remembers who the hell she is. They say men don't notice the little things, that they're all about what's loud, what's obvious, what's barely dressed and barely thought through, but oh, how wrong they are. Men notice everything, they just don't speak it. They don't always react. But they observe, like shadows at midnight, like ghosts in the cracks. And while she's busy fixing her hair and contouring her cheekbones, he's watching the way she touches the glass after taking a sip, the way her fingers wrap around it like she's remembering someone she lost. He notices how she walks in a room full of people, pretending not to care, but her eyes scan for one person, just one, and when she doesn't find him, she adjusts her posture like armor. He sees the chipped nail polish and wonders who she scratched. He sees the necklace she always wears and wonders who it belonged to before it became her favorite. He catches that pause between her sentences, the hesitation before she speaks her truth, like she's calculating whether the room can handle it. He notices the moment she goes silent when someone brings up a name, and how her silence screams louder than any scream he's ever heard. It's not the dress, not the heels, not the laugh that she rehearsed in the mirror. It's the unguarded moments, the pieces she didn't mean to drop. That's where the gold is. That's where the mystery hides. And men, real men, they chase mysteries, not mannequins. They're not hypnotized by perfection. They're haunted by authenticity. He remembers the way she looked at a dog in the street like it was her old friend. The way she reached for her phone and then put it down, like she was too tired to explain herself again. He caught the nervous flicker in her smile when someone complimented her, like she was still trying to believe she was worthy of kindness. He noticed how she laughed a little too loud when the room got tense, like her humor was a smoke bomb, a distraction. Oh, they notice when she switches her perfume, when she starts replying slower, when she stops explaining, when she starts pulling back inch by inch. when her jokes get darker and her eyes get quieter. They notice when she stops asking questions and starts nodding too easily. That's when a man who's paying attention realizes something's dying, that her spark is flickering, that someone's draining her spirit and she's too proud to say it out loud. They remember how she once lit up talking about her dreams, and now she talks like she's reporting the news. They remember how she used to dance without music, and now she barely taps her foot. That shift, that drop in color, that's what real men feel in their bones. A man will notice how she treats waiters, how she talks about her exes, whether she watches the sky or just her screen, whether she holds her breath in elevators, whether she says, "I'm fine," like it's a poem she's memorized. He'll notice how she rearranges her bag when she's nervous, how she clutches her keys like a weapon, how she walks faster in the dark and still pretends she's not afraid. They say men don't get it, that they don't care. But a man who sees, he notices everything. Especially the things she hides, especially the moments when she's too tired to perform. When she lets the mask slip, when her laugh fades too soon, when she checks the time a little too often, when she says she's busy, but her eyes say she's lonely. And the cruelest part? Sometimes he notices all of it and says nothing. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's afraid of what it means. Because to acknowledge her depth is to admit that she's drowning, and he's not sure if he's strong enough to pull her out. Or worse, he's the reason she's sinking, so he stays quiet, observing, collecting her secrets like scars, wondering when the last page of her patience will turn, wondering if he'll be a footnote or the villain in her story. Because men do notice. They just don't always know what to do with what they see. They always say women are emotional, right? Fragile, delicate, soft little creatures who cry over nothing and smile for approval. But let me tell you what he sees. A man with eyes wide open. A man who's tasted life's bitter punch. He sees the storm in her silence. The fury tucked behind mascara. She doesn't break easily. She bends. She bends until her spine forgets it was once steel, not silk. And when she finally snaps, it's not chaos, it's precision, cold, quiet, deliberate. A woman doesn't erupt like a man. She implodes. And nobody hears it but the ones who made her that way. He notices when her tone turns colder than the wind, when her hands no longer shake, when she listens without blinking, without breathing, because she's building a case in her head. Every slight, every betrayal, every time she had to say, "It's okay," when it wasn't. He watches the way she stops fighting. Not because she agrees, but because the war in her mind is bloodier than the one on the table. She's rehearsing her exit while smiling at your jokes. They think she wants flowers. No, she wants peace. And maybe a little revenge, but peace mostly. He notices how she gives and gives until there's nothing left but the echo of her own voice in a room that never cared to listen. He sees when she starts dressing sharper, speaking slower, laughing less. That's not growth, that's grief, disguised as confidence. That's what it looks like when a woman finally realizes no one is coming to save her. So she becomes her own damn hero, sword in one hand, scars in the other. He sees how she scans a room like she's looking for danger, like she's remembering every face that once smiled before stabbing. And still she walks in with grace, with poise, with a back so straight it looks like she's wearing her pain as posture. They never notice when the light goes out in a man's eyes, but when it fades in hers, Even the devil flinches. They notice how she stops checking her phone, how she doesn't reply as fast, how her good mornings become colder than marble. That's not apathy. That's armor. That's a woman who's done explaining herself to people who only heard her when she screamed. Now she whispers, and the smart ones lean in. The rest, they choke on her silence. She doesn't slam doors anymore. She leaves them open so you see what walking away really looks like. He notices when she starts wearing red, not for attention, but because it looks like vengeance. When she cuts her hair, not for fashion, but because she's shedding the version of herself that begged, that pleaded, that cried behind closed doors while smiling in public. A woman doesn't become cold. She cools off like steel, heated once, burned twice, now forged into something you can't break. He sees the way she starts talking in fewer words, the way she pauses before answering like she's decoding the cost of truth. Every conversation becomes a negotiation, every look a warning. They said she was emotional. What they meant was, she felt everything and survived it. What they feared was, she remembers every word, every tone, every moment. You thought she wasn't. He notices when her kindness turns transactional, when the warmth in her touch becomes calculated. That's not a change. That's what happens when love turns to data. She used to believe in potential. Now she believes in patterns. You lie once, she remembers. You lie twice, she smiles. You lie a third time, and she vanishes so smoothly you'll think she was never there. And still she dreams. Not like before. Now her dreams are lined with locks and passwords, fortresses built on experience. She hopes, but with one eye open. She trusts, but never fully, because every time she gave her soul, someone tried to set it on fire. So now she carries water in her eyes, in her voice, in her silence. He notices how she no longer corrects people when they misunderstand her. She just lets them drown in their assumptions. That's not pride. That's survival. That's a woman who's learned that being misunderstood is safer than being known by the wrong people. She doesn't argue anymore. She just observes, quietly, dangerously, with the calm of someone who's seen the worst and came back dressed like elegance. They say independence is admirable. A little applause for the woman who pays her own bills, locks her own doors, fixes her own sink. Cute. Until that same independence becomes inconvenient. Suddenly she's too cold, too distant, too hard to love. Because the world doesn't know what to do with a woman who doesn't need anyone. Especially a woman who has trained herself to want less than what she deserves, just to avoid begging for what should have been given free. She sits in a room alone, not because she has no one, but because she's learned peace is louder in silence than it ever was in company. And when she pours wine into a glass at midnight, she's not lonely. She's sacred, untouchable, a little dangerous, because she's found a rhythm that doesn't rely on being seen to be valid. She stopped waiting for applause the day she realized people clap for what they understand, and no one really understands a woman who builds her own armor out of broken promises. She knows what it's like to laugh at her own jokes, to cry without witnesses, to make tough decisions without asking for permission. She knows how to fake energy at work, then come home and fall apart without a sound. Not because she wants to be strong, but because she's got no choice. Nobody checks on the strong ones. No one looks twice at the woman who seems fine. She's become fluent in pretend. And the scariest part? She's good at it. So good, you wouldn't see the cracks unless you stare long enough. And no one stares anymore. They notice her discipline, her structure, her control, but they don't see what it costs to maintain that calm, to hold her own hand in the dark, to hug herself when her bones feel cold. She'll talk to walls before she ever picks up the phone, because vulnerability, that got her heart broken once. Twice. Too many times. Now she chooses silence, not out of pride, but as a security system. No one can twist your words if they never hear them. She's not looking for a man to rescue her. She's looking for someone who doesn't need to be reminded that even warriors need rest, that even queens want softness without it being mistaken for weakness. But men, they get intimidated. They confuse her solitude for arrogance. They mistake her standards for attitude because she won't settle. She won't lower her voice to be heard by people who don't listen. She won't dim her light just to fit into someone's dimly lit life. She doesn't flirt for fun. She doesn't date for attention. She doesn't entertain just to fill the silence. Every interaction is a gamble, a test, a quiet calculation. Who deserves her energy? Who earns access to her softness? Who sees the woman behind the independence, the heart beneath the armor, the scars behind the smile? She's not angry, she's exhausted. Exhausted from carrying herself through breakdowns while pretending she's fine. From dreaming big in a world that constantly tells her to shrink. From being told she's intimidating when all she's ever wanted was to be understood. She has learned to live without applause, to clap for herself after every tiny victory. And oh, she celebrates. Quietly, alone, a little wine, a little music, a whispered, "You did it again." People romanticize strength until they realize it means doing it all when your hands are shaking, until they realize it means smiling while your insides scream. She's the woman who fixes her own crown at 3 a.m., then shows up at work like nothing happened. No mascara smudge, no trace of the war she fought the night before. And that's the thing. They don't notice the battles she wins in silence. They only see the poise, not the pain. The calm, not the chaos. The beauty, not the burden. But he notices the rare one, the one with eyes like mirrors, who doesn't flinch when he sees the truth. He notices the strength in her restraint, the fire in her stillness. He doesn't try to tame her, he joins her, quietly, respectfully. He doesn't ask her to be less. He just stands beside her, not in front, not behind. And that's what she's been waiting for. Not a savior, just someone who doesn't get scared when she takes the mask off. Someone who sees the woman who lives alone and doesn't try to fix her, but chooses to understand her.